Hey everyone! I want to give you a little tour of my vivarium today. I know I said in a previous video I could probably do an entire video just on that, showing you some of the plants and stuff that I have in there. So I think you'll enjoy it. I'll talk a bit more about how I set it up and the frogs and other inhabitants that I have in there as I go. Let's just get right to it. Okay, so here is the tank. It is an Exoterra, if you're wondering. This is a fairly large size that I just got secondhand. Definitely recommend looking at your local marketplace or Craigslist or Kijiji or whatever you use to find one that's used, because people are getting rid of these things all the time and you can get them for a lot cheaper than if they're brand new. Still not cheap. A tank this size is, I think I paid $200 for it. So just in case you're thinking of setting up something similar, that is what it is. I have 4 poison dart frogs in here. So they are a breeding group of 3 males and 1 female. Now, poison dart frogs, the first question I always get is, aren't they poisonous? And yes, it is kind of in the name, but that poison actually isn't something that they produce themselves. The poison comes from poisonous insects that they eat in the wild, and then they store the poison, and then they use it on their skin to protect themselves. But in captivity, they eat flightless fruit flies, so that's not a problem. And poison dart frogs are actually relatively easy as far as reptiles and amphibians go. Like, they don't, as far as I know, need UVB. They just need high humidity, temperatures of around 70 to 80 degrees, so not too hot for them. But they can live in an enclosure like this that is pretty much self-sustaining. So this is bioactive. I have springtails and isopods in here that the frogs can eat if they want to, but they're basically the cleanup crew. So all the poop and everything just becomes fertilizer from the plants, and I don't have to really worry about it too much. Like, I don't really have to clean this tank, which is awesome. It kind of just looks after itself. Obviously, I have to prune away plants, and I've updated it a few times since I originally set it up. You will see some white stuff. That is from the calcium powder that I dust the fruit flies with before I feed them to the frogs. That just kind of gets everywhere, so there's not much I can do about that. I will spray the tank down, but I just wanted to show you, for example, this Selaginella uncinata looks way better when it's dry versus when it's real wet. This plant has a beautiful blue iridescence to it, and it's not like a camera trick or anything. It's very easy to see with your naked eyes. It's quite a beautiful plant, and not too hard to grow as long as you have high humidity and it doesn't dry out. The ones over here are a little less blue. Some of them are actually kind of pink, but if it's at just the right light level, it will be this beautiful blue color. Won't always be as bright. For example, when I water it, you'll see that it kind of gets more dull, or if it's growing lower, it maybe won't be as bright, but a lot of people say that the iridescence actually helps to capture light. So you'll see this blue iridescence on a lot of understory plants that live where you wouldn't normally get a lot of light. A more recent addition to the tank has been Zelda, the mourning gecko. So from the research I've done, it has said that mourning geckos and frogs can live together because the frogs are more terrestrial. They live more at the bottom, and the geckos will kind of be at the top where the frogs aren't as much. So they kind of stay out of each other's way, but they like the same environments, and They do both eat fruit flies, but the mourning geckos will also eat like a fruit mixture. So it's the same thing you feed crested geckos, if you know anything about them. They don't always eat bugs. You can also feed them like a mix. So that's what she eats, and that's what those little cups are. She lives in that spot. Usually I'll find her hanging out. She's so small. She's so small. I'll show you how this tank is. It's like I have some cork that I put on the glass, and then at the back it's styrofoam covered by cocoa coir, and it's like pressed up against the back, but there's like a little gap at the back. So she's small enough that she fits in there when she gets scared or whatever. Like that's where she usually lives, is actually at the back of the tank, behind where everything else is growing. So she is very well hidden, and you will probably not see her. She's very difficult to get. Fun fact about mourning geckos, they're actually all female, so they reproduce by cloning themselves, essentially, not through sexual reproduction, which is pretty cool. So you just have one, and she will eventually maybe have babies and raise them herself, and I'll have a couple mourning geckos in here, so a little mourning gecko colony. I think that would be pretty cool, especially if I could maybe sell some. You know, it's kind of fun to raise little babies. I know I've had a lot of fun with the frogs. I have these little petri dishes. That one is getting kind of dirty, so I should wash it. But I have little baby frogs. They will lay their eggs in there, and then I take them out, and once they hatch, I put them in little cups, and then they grow up into little frogs. Okay, I just gave everything a bit of a spray down. You can see the Selaginella isn't nearly as iridescent now. It's always like that when it gets wet. It doesn't have the same shine to it. I give my plants a mist. Basically once a day I give everything a good soak. I actually have some aquatic mosses growing in here, and as long as the as long as the humidity is around 100%, they can actually grow. So not all of them are doing amazing. There's some yellowing, but most of them seem to at least be alive. So we'll see if they can stay okay. A lot of times with moss, you'll see like you'll have brown bits, but then new stuff will grow out of stuff that looked dead. So I try not to throw out any of my moss too quickly to keep the moisture high. So dart frogs need like 90-100% humidity. I have like a plexiglass sheet at the top of here, just to prevent the moisture from evaporating through the screen too quickly. It has warped over time because then I have these 24-watt grow lights, 3 of them sitting on top, so it's kind of warped it. There's nothing special about these, but they do the trick. And I mean, people might think I have issues with mold. Basically, the springtails and isopods take care of that. As long as things are in balance, then there's generally not too many problems with that sort of thing. Like, you will see a little bit here, but you'll notice that's on some a dead plant matter. I tried to put a little begonia, I think there, a little stem of one, and it didn't survive. So now there's a little bit of mold, but I mean, a little bit of mold doesn't actually hurt the plants. It's just the nutrients being turned back into the soil or whatever. You'll actually see down in the tanks. So the way I've constructed it is, it's a layer of, oh, I forget how I made it. It's like a homemade version of the ABG mix. I didn't have tree fern bark, so I used cocoa coir instead. I think it's cocoa coir, some perlite, some sphagnum moss, and then a layer of mesh, and then a layer of leca, so that there's like a water reservoir at the bottom. This white stuff has started growing. You would think it's like insect eggs or something, or styrofoam, but I definitely did not put a bunch of styrofoam in there. Pretty sure that's just like mycorrhizae or like just fungal stuff in the soil, but I'm pretty sure it's beneficial. It's kind of spread to the see if I pick up this piece of cork. Yeah, you can see how it's like in the cork and everything. But it's not like hurting it. Everything's just kind of growing together, and as stuff decomposes, that is normal. So not exactly something that I'm worried about, but it could worry you if you're like seeing that and not sure what it is. I was a little alarmed at first, but then I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure it's just beneficial stuff. I use cork for all the like wood in here. Originally, I tried to use, I think some pine that I had collected, but I learned that like resinous wood is not good to use with frogs that have very, very sensitive skin. So I got some cork from a reptile shop, which is really nice. It has a really nice gnarled texture to it. Plants grow onto it really well. It also doesn't decompose easily, so it's kind of like the perfect thing for a terrarium. I can definitely see why a lot of people use it. It's also light, so it's relatively inexpensive in my opinion. I think it makes a perfect home. I mean, a lot of it is covered now, but that's the way that I like it. As far as specific plants, so I'd really like to get some more begonia in here. I actually have a few on the way, but one thing I have had a problem with in this tank is plants seem to do really good for a time, but then they can rot randomly for, the humidity is so high. If they get something like in their growth point, plants can deteriorate very quickly, unfortunately. And sometimes on this lower level, you can see how tall the tank is. There's not actually a lot of light that reaches these lower levels, so not a lot of plants can actually do very well. This one, begonia, has managed to survive. This is solely mutata, I think. And the colors of the leaves actually change significantly depending on how much light they get. This one seems to be not massive, but doing okay. This is definitely a begonia that likes very high humidity, so it's done well in here. I have one little jewel orchid that's growing back. So I had a jewel orchid that I planted in here a while ago, and then randomly was doing well for a long time, and then the stem started rotting from the base down. I think it just got some moisture in the top and it rotted. So I actually thought the whole thing was rotten. This new little leaf that grew was actually kind of a cool surprise to see, so I'm happy about that. I used to have a Macoides petola, like the lightning jewel orchid, in here as well that I absolutely loved, but it just randomly rotted and died, and I was really sad about that. So I'm hoping I can get another one because it thrived in here for a long time, even with very low light, but I guess it probably also just got crown rot one day and did not recover. Unfortunately, that's happened to all my jewel orchids that I've put in this environment. I've kind of learned that it's better to keep like duplicates of some of those to grow them in a more like controlled environment. There's just a lot of you know, things that can happen in here, like they can get trampled by the dart frogs, or they can get smothered by some of the other plants that are growing too quickly. For example, this ficus, small ficus species, can so easily get out of control. As you can kind of see, it's like taking over the whole back wall. So there's just a lot that can happen. I've lost a lot of plants in here that I've had to replace over time. So even though it is like a really good environment, stuff can still happen. This is a new one that I introduced that seems like it's doing really well. It's marsh pennywort, I think. You can see it forms these like little rhizomes. It spreads itself, and it seems to be doing okay. I always have a hard time with this like terrestrial area at the bottom. It's difficult to get things to grow and do well. It feels like they don't usually get a ton of light. But these ones seem to be okay. Like they're small, but that's okay. I actually think they're better if they're kind of petite like that. So I'm really happy that those seem to be doing well. They definitely need a lot of moisture, so that's a good spot for them. I have this little epiphytic fern. I think it's a microgramma species, reptins maybe. And a lot of these plants, people were asking where I get my terrarium plants. I do find it's a challenge in Ontario. I don't have a lot of good sources, but one good one is Understory Enterprises. They've been doing this for a long time, and they have a lot of really cool species. They've been at a few plant shows and stuff that I've been to. They were also at the reptile expo that I went to. That's where I got Zelda, my mourning gecko, and they were there, as well as a few other shops that had some terrarium plants. Another one is the Hidden Path. I believe I got my Selaginella from them. They have some cool stuff. And then as far as begonias go, I haven't ordered from her yet, but I actually just ordered some the other day. Begonia Flora, who is based, I believe, in Quebec, has some really cool begonias and terrarium species. So definitely good to check out if you're looking for something a little more unusual. Not all of the plants are rare or anything. This one is one you can find pretty easily in garden centers. I always like looking at the little like $2 and $3 pots that they have of like foliage plants. Just little ferns and stuff are easy to replace if they die. Like some of them do grow a little bit like too big, but I found some really good plants just at my local nursery. One thing I love is moss, and I do find that is hard to source in Canada. That stuff is really cool. At the bottom, I'm not sure what kind it is. I have some more over here. I got that at the Reptile Expo. Usually you'll just get like a mixed moss bundle. I know the Hidden Path had some when I was there, as well as I think Understory Enterprises. So if you're looking for moss or any sort of terrarium stuff, reptile places are like the way to go. They've been doing this for a long time, so that's a good place to find things. This one isn't doing the greatest, but this is a Burl Marks Fantasy. It's been a popular terrarium plant for a long time because the leaves stay nice and small. They get bigger than this, but they stay relatively petite. This is a little Philodendron lupinum. It was just a very small cutting someone gave me, and I wasn't sure if I would like it, so I just stuck it in here, and it's still alive. Probably has found something to root into. I think. Yeah, if I tug on it, it doesn't want to come away. Things root very easily in here. I stuck my, case in point, I stuck my melanochrysum in here because I kind of just got sick of it not doing well in the cabinet. You can see the like roots, it's grown in just like a couple days being in here. I'm trying to get it to like grow up the side, but it's being a little problematic. Let's see the roots. It's only been here like a few days. And I didn't like acclimate it or anything, I just stuck it in here. I didn't root it beforehand. I figure if they live, they live. If they don't, you know, whatever. Another plant that does really good in here that I could not grow anywhere else are air plants. So air plants, I always had problems after soaking them that I would always get rot. I would always get water in the crown, and no matter how long I left them upside down, they would always rot on me. And I think a bit of that too is just they need a lot of light. They need more light than you think. These actually grow like at the very top of the vivarium. So they get a fair amount of light and they get misted like every day. So they also live in like 100% humidity. And that's like the environment that they like and seem to thrive in. This one actually flowered and was the first time I ever had one of my own air plants flower. So that was kind of cool. Now I have had air plants rot in here as well. And again, it's usually because they get moisture in their crown and then it just like the whole thing just like melts one day. So that's not great, but these ones seem to be doing really good. Cool thing about air plants is they will actually grow roots on them, but it's more to like anchor themselves. They still like get their water and nutrients through the hairs on their leaves. I think they're called trichomes, something like that. But they will grow roots as well to like anchor themselves into the substrate. Will you stick there without falling? Yeah. Cool. I had some Monstera and Adansonii in here. These are basically weeds now that I've cut this back so many times. Adansonii is actually kind of like too big for this terrarium, but when I originally set it up, I wanted to use mostly plants that I already have because the temperature range of like 70 to 80 degrees for, you know, dart frogs was like the same as a lot of the plants that I had. So I thought, well, I'll just use what I have and everything will be, everything will work. But it turns out they kind of grow too fast to be good in here. They just grow up to the grow light and then they get burnt. So I just kind of chop these back every once in a while. But I do think it's cool to have so much stuff growing like on the background. The most prolific is this Ficus pumilia, I think, Pumilia minima. But I also have some oak leaf ficus down here, quercifolia, I think. That one's really pretty. And this was the new one I got at the Reptile Expo. This is actually a ficus species as well. It was just sold as species Panama. And I'm really liking that one. I like when they start to kind of cascade and do their own thing. I think it's really cool. These bromeliads were just cheap from IKEA that I got about 3 years ago, and they're still going strong. This guy here was one of my recent imports and seems to still be pretty happy. I've just been misting it every day and trying not to touch it. You know, the frogs are probably climbing all over it, but it seems to be doing okay. I think there's some new fronds that I saw developing, so new growth is always a good sign. This little orchid is also doing well. Same situation, might get a little trampled, but seems to be doing okay. Not anchored yet, hasn't really rooted itself into the cork, but yeah, seems to be doing good. This one is Darvulia, something like that, Parvifolia. Everyone just thinks it looks like parsley. I never even thought of that, but anyways, it's a really cool like creeping epiphytic plant, and the fronds stay nice and small. This is another favorite of mine. This is a Markgravia. Not sure exactly what species, but the new growth comes out the most vibrant red color. This is actually a little light. And then it just kind of forms this like beautiful gradient as the leaves fade down. Those are definitely some of my favorites in here. This little bromeliad was also just one I got at the garden center, so nothing too special. This little orchid, this is a Schuenopsis fragrans. I'm actually worried I might be getting too much moisture in here and then it might rot. I'm always worried about crown rot with my orchids. Seems like it's growing a little bit. It already had these spikes when I got it, so I can't take credit for that. It did have a pretty little fingernail-sized bloom. Very pretty miniature orchid. I'd like to get a few more orchids in here, but I'm afraid to mount them directly on the cork just because of the, you know, track record I've had with some of my other plants just kind of randomly dying. So we'll see if I can keep this one alive. Maybe I'll consider getting a few more. I had some large Phalaenopsis orchids in here before, but they were just too big and they weren't thriving. They weren't getting the light that they really needed. Here are some babies. I just have a makeshift kind of terrarium set up for them. They're very brave. These are ones that just emerged a few days ago. These are 4 months out of water. They are quite bold, actually. I have 2 in there. They're not really scared. These are tadpoles at various stages. We just have a bit of moss, aquatic moss, and oak leaf in there. And then these are older frogs that have their front legs. Once they get front legs, it's about a week until they emerge onto land. And you can actually see that that one over there is no longer a tadpole, is a little froglet. And he's ready to go into one of the grow out tanks, which is very exciting. That guy still has a tail, but he'll be on land soon too. Let me see if I open it up if they'll all spook. No. These ones here are pretty brave because they get a lot of traffic and people looking at them all the time. Not so many places to hide. Oh, look, there's a little guy right in that leaf. Aw, hello. Oh, I think I have 3 or 4 in this bin. Hello, little babby. I love these guys. And so does my husband, so it's easy to convince him to keep them around. Here's the other baby. He looks just like his mom.